The second meeting was very different from the first. Tova came alone. No honor guard. No weapons. Just the commander of the Vrel invasion force, walking across the same soccer field where he had stood with such confidence just 2 days before. His scales were pale gray, almost white, the color of defeat. The color of fear that had been felt for so long it had become permanent. Colonel Park was waiting for him at the center of the field. This time, only Lieutenant Yuna accompanied him. The colonel stood with his hands behind his back, his face calm and unreadable. Yuna stood beside him, her tablet ready, her rifle still slung across her back. Tova stopped 3 meters from them. He looked at the colonel for a long moment without speaking. Then he lowered his head. "I need to understand," he said. His voice was quiet, broken. "On every world we have conquered, only the warrior caste fights. The civilians flee or submit. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked." He looked up again. His yellow eyes were tired. "Why do your people fight? You're elderly? You're young? You're workers and teachers and farmers? Why do they not run? Why do they not hide? And why," his voice cracked, "why do they all shoot like trained killers?" Colonel Park was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about how to explain something obvious to someone who had never considered it before. "Commander," he said finally, "humans have been at war with each other for 10,000 years. We developed weapons that could kill at a distance before we developed writing. Every culture on our planet, from the coldest mountains to the hottest deserts, has traditions of hunting, of marksmanship, of teaching children to aim true." He paused, letting that sink in. "You asked which human is our sniper. You wanted to identify the threat, to isolate it, to negotiate with it. But the answer is not so simple." He took a breath. "The grandmother who tends her rooftop garden learned to shoot as a girl, hunting with her father. The student who delivers food has been shooting since childhood. The fisherman who killed your scouts spent his mandatory military service as a designated marksman. Even after he left the service, he never stopped practicing." Tova listened. His 4 hands hung limp at his sides. "You train all your people for war?" he asked. "No." Park shook his head. "We train them to survive, to hunt, to protect themselves. The war part." He paused. "The war part comes naturally when someone threatens their home." Tova looked at Yuna. She was young, small. She did not look like a warrior. She looked like someone who should be working in an office or studying at a university. But she carried that rifle like it was part of her body. Like it had always been part of her body. Like she had been born with it. "How many?" Tova asked again. The same question he had asked before. But this time, he wanted a different answer. This time, he wanted to understand the true scale of what he faced. Park glanced at Yuna. She did not need to check her tablet. She had memorized the numbers. "On this peninsula alone," she said, "there are approximately 4 million registered firearms. Many more unregistered. At least 2 million people have trained regularly with rifles. Another 3 million have basic proficiency." She met Tova's eyes without flinching. "And that is just one small country on one small part of our planet." Tova's scale shifted from pale gray to something even lighter. "Almost transparent. And the rest of your world?" "There are 8 billion humans," Park said. "I cannot give you exact numbers for the entire planet. But I can tell you this. In some countries, firearm ownership is higher than here. In some, it is lower. But everywhere, there are people who know how to shoot. Hunters, farmers, hobbyists, veterans, parents who want to protect their children. Children who learned from their parents." He stepped closer to Tova, not threatening. Just close enough to make sure the alien understood. "You came here thinking you would face an army. A few thousand soldiers in uniform. You thought you would defeat them and the rest would surrender. He shook his head slowly. But there is no rest. There is no civilian population waiting to be conquered. There are just humans. And humans fight. Tova stood very still. His mind was processing everything he had learned. Everything he had seen. The old woman on the rooftop. The student on the bicycle. The grandfather in his greenhouse. The mother in the church tower. The book club in their 60s, taking turns shooting from their sniper nest. On his world, these people would be protected. Kept safe, hidden away while the warriors fought. That was how civilized species operated. That was how the galaxy worked. But humans were not civilized in that way. Humans were something older. Something more primal. Something that the Vrel had never evolved to face. We will withdraw, Tova said. The words came out slowly, painfully, like he was pulling them from deep inside himself. I will recommend to the Dominion that Earth be reclassified. As what? Tova's translator struggled with the next word. It tried several options before settling on one that was close enough. Unconquerable. Park nodded slowly. That would be wise. May I ask one more question? Of course. Tova looked at Yuna again. At the rifle on her back. At the casual way she stood, ready for anything, afraid of nothing. If I pointed at any random human in this city and asked if they were a sniper, what would the honest answer have been? Park smiled. A real smile this time. The smile of a man who knew exactly how dangerous his people were. Take any civilian, he said. They do not miss. The Vrel warship left Earth 3 days later. The news spread around the world. People celebrated in the streets. Politicians gave speeches about human resilience. Generals studied the tactics that had been used and wrote new training manuals. But in Pohang, life returned to normal very quickly. Bongsoon went back to her rooftop garden. Her peppers had survived the war, and she was proud of that. She was awarded a medal by the government, but she declined the ceremony. She said she had vegetables to harvest. The medal sat in a drawer in her bedroom, next to her husband's old photographs. Taeyong returned to his convenience store. He was offered a sponsorship from a sporting goods company, and he accepted. The money helped him pay for his uncle's medical bills. He still went shooting every weekend, just like before. Ho Jing continued his deliveries. His customers noticed that he seemed more confident now, more sure of himself. They did not know why. He never told them about the shots he had made from 900 meters away. Canada's book club continued meeting every week. They discussed novels and short stories and poetry. They also discussed tactics and positioning and the importance of rotating your firing position. The other book clubs in the city started inviting them to speak at meetings, and Chol-Su returned to his greenhouse. His granddaughter Mi-young visited him every week. They would sit together in that small glass room, surrounded by tomato plants and pepper vines, and they would talk about the old days. About the war he had fought 50 years ago. About the skills he had taught her. About the enemy they had faced together. Sometimes they would practice shooting. Just for an hour or two. Just to stay sharp. Grandpa, Mi-young asked one day, do you think they will come back? The aliens? Chol-Su thought about it while watering his tomatoes. Maybe, he said. Maybe not. The universe is a big place. There are probably many others out there like them. Others who think they can conquer anyone they want. And if they come? Chol-Su smiled. It was a warm smile. A grandfather's smile. Then we will be ready. We will always be ready. He set down his watering can and picked up a ripe tomato, examining it in the sunlight. That is what humans do, child. We prepare. We practice. We protect our homes and our families. He handed her the tomato, and when the time comes, we do not miss. 3 months later, a Vrel diplomatic vessel returned to Earth. not to invade, not to threaten, to negotiate trade agreements. The Dominion had decided that a species where any random civilian could kill at 500 meters was better as an ally than an enemy. The negotiations went well. Earth joined the galactic community. Humans traveled to other worlds. Other species traveled to Earth. And everywhere they went, humans brought their traditions with them. Their love of hunting. Their respect for marksmanship. Their belief that everyone should know how to protect themselves. Other species watched and learned. Some were afraid. Some were impressed. All of them remembered the lesson that the Vrel had learned the hard way. Never underestimate a human. Even the ones who look harmless. Even the grandmothers tending their gardens. Even the students riding their bicycles. Even the fishermen on their boats. Because any human could be a sniper. And humans do not miss. Tova made his decision on the morning of the 5th day. He would not retreat. He could not retreat. The Dominion did not retreat. The Dominion had conquered 37 worlds. They would not be stopped by one small country on one small planet, no matter how many of its civilians could shoot. He gathered his officers on the bridge. His scales had returned to their confident green color. He had convinced himself that the humans were bluffing. They had to be bluffing. A few thousand skilled shooters did not make an army. Superior numbers and firepower always won in the end. That was the law of war. That was the truth of the universe. We will launch a full assault on the city center, Tova announced. All remaining forces. Heavy armor. Air support. We will overwhelm them with numbers. We will crush their resistance in a single strike. Myra looked worried. Commander, are you certain? The casualties could be acceptable. Tova cut her off. We have already lost too many soldiers to caution. It is time to show these humans what the Dominion can do when we stop holding back. The assault began at noon. 12 armored vehicles rolled down the main roads toward the city center. Each vehicle carried 20 soldiers. Above them, 4 attack craft provided air cover. Behind them, 300 infantry marched in formation. It was the largest force Tova had deployed on a single city in his entire career. The humans seemed to disappear. The streets were empty. The windows were dark. The city looked abandoned. Tova watched from his command center and allowed himself to feel confident. They were running. Finally, they were running. But the humans were not running. They were preparing. On the north side of the city, 74-year-old Cholsu sat in his greenhouse. The glass walls had been replaced with sheets of plastic after the invasion began. The plastic was cheap and thin. It did not block his view. It did not stop his bullets. Cholsu had converted this greenhouse into a firing position 30 years ago. His wife had complained about him shooting in the backyard. The neighbors complained about the noise. So he built the greenhouse with special walls that absorbed sound. He put in a small table, a comfortable chair, and a rack for his rifles. He had spent thousands of hours in this room, practicing, training, keeping his skills sharp. Now, finally, those skills had a purpose. His granddaughter, Mi-young, sat beside him. She had a pair of binoculars and a notebook. Her job was to spot targets and calculate distances. She had learned this from him when she was a child, playing games in the mountains. Now it was not a game. Grandpa, vehicles approaching from the east. 600 meters. Wind from the north, maybe 5 kilometers per hour. Cholsu looked through his scope. He saw the armored vehicles. He saw the soldiers marching behind them. He saw the weapons they carried, weapons that could level buildings with a single shot. He was not afraid. He had been afraid once, 50 years ago, in a jungle on the other side of the world. He had learned to master that fear. He had learned to breathe through it, to focus through it, to shoot through it. I see the lead vehicle, he said. The driver is visible through the vision slit. It is a small target, Grandpa. I know, child. I can see it. He adjusted his aim. He controlled his breathing. He remembered his training, decades old, but still fresh in his mind. The vision slit was only 10 centimeters wide. The driver's face behind it was even smaller. At 600 meters, it was a shot most people would call impossible. Chol-Soo squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew straight and true. It passed through the vision slit and hit the driver between the eyes. The armored vehicle swerved sharply and crashed into the vehicle next to it. Both vehicles stopped moving. Their weapons went silent. 2 down, Mi-young said, writing in her notebook. The third vehicle is turning. The driver is... Chol-Soo fired again. Another driver fell. Another vehicle crashed in the first 30 seconds. He disabled 3 armored vehicles without destroying them. He did not need to destroy them. He just needed to stop them. And a vehicle without a driver was a vehicle that could not move. Across the city, similar scenes were happening. The humans had planned for this. They had talked to each other, coordinated, shared information. They knew the routes the Vrel would take. They knew the weak points of the armored vehicles. They knew where to position themselves for the best shots. A mother named Umbai was in the bell tower of a church near the market district. She was 43 years old. She had 2 children, both safe in a shelter outside the city. She had not fired a rifle since her mandatory military service 20 years ago. But some things you never forget. She aimed at the pilots of the attack craft. The craft were fast and heavily armored, but the pilots had to see out of their cockpits. And cockpit glass was not as strong as armor. Her first shot cracked the glass. Her second went through. The craft spun out of control and crashed into an empty building. A retired teacher named Byung-ho was on the roof of an apartment building. He was 61 years old. He had bad knees and worse hearing. But his eyes were still sharp and his hands were still steady. He had been a competitive shooter in his youth, winning medals in national competitions. He aimed at the infantry soldiers who thought they were protected by their formation. They walked close together, shields overlapping, heads down. It was good formation against most weapons, but Byung-ho knew angles. He knew physics. He knew that if he aimed at the ground in front of the formation, the bullet would bounce and hit the soldiers in their legs, below their shields. He fired. A soldier fell, clutching his ankle. He fired again. Another soldier fell. The formation broke as the soldiers tried to find cover. And once the formation broke, they were easy targets for the other shooters, positioned around the street. The assault collapsed in less than an hour. The Vrel retreated. They left behind destroyed vehicles, crashed aircraft, and 200 dead soldiers. The humans did not chase them. They did not need to. They had made their point in his greenhouse. Chol-Soo lowered his rifle and closed his eyes. He was tired. His shoulder ached from the recoil. His eyes burned from staring through the scope, but he was also proud. He had protected his home, his city, his granddaughter. Mi-young put down her binoculars and looked at him. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" "I am fine, child." He opened his eyes and smiled at her. "Just old. These things were easier when I was young. You were amazing." I counted 14 shots. 12 hits. Only 12? He shook his head. "I am getting slow." Mi-young laughed. It was a strange sound in the middle of a war. But it was a good sound. A human sound. "Should we go check on the neighbors?" she asked in a moment. Chol-Soo stood up slowly, his old bones cracking. "First, I need to water my tomatoes. They've been very patient today." He walked to the corner of the greenhouse where his vegetable plants grew. The tomatoes were red and ripe. The peppers were coming in nicely. The lettuce needed more sun. War or no war, a garden needed care. Mi-young watched her grandfather water his plants. She thought about her friends who had fled the city. She thought about her parents, who were safe in Bizon. She thought about all the people who had called her grandfather crazy for spending so much time in his greenhouse with his rifles. He was not crazy. He was prepared. And today, that preparation had saved lives. Outside, the Vrel were regrouping. They were scared and confused. They had never lost like this before. They did not understand how ordinary people, grandparents and teachers and mothers could fight like elite soldiers. But that was because they did not understand humans. They did not understand that for humans, there was no real difference between a civilian and a warrior. Any human could become a warrior when their home was threatened. Any human could pick up a weapon and fight. The Vrel were learning this lesson. They were learning it the hard way. 3 days passed. 3 days that felt like 3 years to Commander Tova. He stood in the command center of his warship and stared at the holographic map of Pohang. Red dots marked the positions where his soldiers had died. There were too many red dots. Far too many. 112. That was the number. 112 Vrel soldiers killed in 72 hours. Not by missiles or tanks or aircraft. Not by explosions or ambush from trained military units. By single shots. 1 bullet, 1 death. Over and over again, Mira approached him carefully. She could see the color of his scales. Dark gray with spots of black. Anger and confusion mixed together. She had never seen him like this. Commander, I have finished my analysis. Speak. The shots are coming from an average distance of 300 to 500 meters. The weapons used are primitive rifles. Bolt action, semi-automatic. Some appear to be very old. Decades old. She paused. The accuracy rate is 94%. Nearly every shot fired has hit its target. Tova turned to look at her. That is impossible. Even our best marksmen do not achieve such accuracy in combat conditions. I know, Commander. I checked the data many times. It is correct. Then these must be their elite soldiers. They're special forces, disguised as civilians. Myra shook her head. We have captured several shooters. We interrogated them. She pulled up images on her tablet. This one is a female, age 67. She was tending vegetables on her roof when we arrived. This one is a male, age 23. He works at a small store. This one is a male, age 16. He is still in school. Tova grabbed the tablet and stared at the faces. An old woman. A young man with soft hands. A child. These were the people killing his soldiers? They must have military training, he insisted. Hidden service. Secret programs. The old woman has never served. The young man was rejected from military service for health reasons. The child has never held a weapon outside of hunting trips with his father. Myra took a breath. Commander, these are ordinary civilians. They are not soldiers. They are not trained killers. They are just people. People do not shoot like this. Humans do. Tova threw the tablet across the room. It shattered against the wall. His 4 hands clenched into fists. On 37 worlds, he had never faced anything like this. Civilians hid. Civilians ran. Civilians surrendered. Civilians did not pick up weapons and fight back with deadly precision. On the ground, his soldiers were afraid. Tova could hear it in their reports. Private Dren had watched his squad leader die from a shot fired by a young man on a bicycle. The young man had been pedaling down the street like any other person. Then he had stopped, pulled a rifle from a bag on his back, fired once, and pedaled away. The whole thing had taken less than 5 seconds. Another soldier reported being shot at by a woman hanging laundry on her balcony. She had a rifle hidden under the wet clothes. She fired, hit a Vrel soldier in the neck, and went back to hanging laundry as if nothing had happened. The humans were not fighting like an army. They were fighting like ghosts. They appeared, they killed, and they vanished. And any one of them could be a shooter. The old man walking his dog. The mother pushing a stroller. The teenager on a motorcycle. Any of them could pull out a weapon and fire with perfect accuracy. Tova ordered his soldiers to shoot anyone carrying anything that looked like a weapon. This was a mistake. The humans adapted. They hid their rifles in bags, in boxes, in baby carriages. They assembled them from parts stored in different locations. A soldier would search a human and find nothing. 10 minutes later, that same human would kill from 300 meters away. The Vrel tried to use their superior technology. They launched drones to find the shooters. The humans shot the drones down. They deployed armored vehicles. The humans shot through the vision slits and killed the drivers. They set up snipers of their own in tall buildings. The human civilians shot them before they could even aim. On the second day, a Vrel sniper team set up on top of a hospital. They thought they were safe. They were 800 meters from the nearest building. No human rifle could hit them at that distance. They were wrong. A man named Ho Jin killed both of them with 2 shots. He was a delivery driver. He spent his days riding a small truck through the city, bringing packages to homes and businesses. He knew every street, every building, every rooftop. And he had been shooting since he was 10 years old, taught by his grandfather, who had been a soldier in a war that ended before Ho Jin was born. Ho Jin made those shots from 900 meters away. He used his grandfather's old rifle, a weapon older than himself. After the shots, he climbed down from his position, got back in his delivery truck, and drove to his next delivery. He had a job to do. After all, by the third day, the Vrel soldiers refused to leave their landing zones. They stayed near their dropships, hiding behind armored walls. They only moved in large groups with heavy escort. Even then, they still died. One shot at a time. Tova received reports from his scouts in other parts of the country. It was the same everywhere. In Seoul, a grandmother had killed 8 soldiers from her apartment balcony before they found her. In Bizen, a fishing boat captain had used an antique rifle to hit targets from over a kilometer away, shooting from the deck of his boat as it moved on the waves. In Daegu, a group of women from a book club had organized a rotating sniper watch, taking turns shooting from a church bell tower, a book club. Old women who met once a week to discuss stories. They were killing his soldiers. Tova did not understand. He could not understand. In his experience, only warriors fought. Only those trained for combat. Only those who wore uniforms and followed orders. That was how civilized species worked. That was how the galaxy worked. But humans were different. Humans were something the Vrel had never seen before. They were a species where the line between civilian and warrior did not exist. Where a grandmother tending her garden could become a deadly sniper in seconds. Where a child going to school could kill from distances that would challenge trained marksmen. On the evening of the third day, Tova made a decision. He contacted his communication officers. He would request a meeting with the human leaders. He would try to understand what kind of species he was dealing with, because whatever humans were, they were not like anything he had conquered before. And for the first time, Tova was not sure he could conquer them at all. The sky turned dark over the coastal city of Pohang on a Tuesday afternoon. It was not clouds that blocked the sun. It was something much larger. Something that should not exist. The Vrel warship was 3 kilometers long. Its shadow fell across the city like a blanket of night. People stopped in the streets and looked up. Cars pulled over. Children pointed. For a full minute, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just watched the impossible thing hanging in the sky. Commander Tova stood on the bridge of his ship and looked down at the small, human city. He had done this 37 times before on 37 different worlds. The script was always the same. Land the troops. Broadcast the surrender demands. Kill anyone who resists. Enslave the rest. Move to the next city. Repeat until the planet submits. Tova was a tall creature. He stood nearly 3 meters high with thick green scales covering his body. He had 4 arms, each one ending in clawed fingers. His eyes were yellow with black slits for pupils. On his chest, he wore medals from his many conquests. He was proud of those medals. Each one represented a world that had fallen to him. His tactical officer, a younger Vrel named Mira, approached him with a data tablet. "Commander, scans are complete. This city has no major military installations. Population is approximately 500,000. Resistance should be minimal." Tova made a sound of satisfaction. "Good. Deploy the first wave. Standard formation. Secure the main roads and government buildings. I want this city under control before sunset." Dropships launched from the belly of the warship. They fell like metal seeds, their engines screaming as they descended. They landed in parks, in parking lots, in open fields. Their doors opened, and Vrel soldiers poured out. The soldiers were smaller than Tova, but still large by human standards. They wore black armor and carried pulse rifles that could burn through steel. They moved in tight formations, covering each other as they advanced into the city. The humans ran. Of course, they ran. They always ran at first. Tova watched the chaos on his screens with bored eyes. Mothers grabbed children. Workers fled from buildings. The streets became rivers of panicked people. This was normal. This was expected. What Tova did not expect was what happened next. On a rooftop 6 blocks from the main landing zone, a woman named Bong Soon was watering her pepper plants. She was 67 years old. Her hair was gray and pulled back in a simple bun. Her hands were rough from decades of hard work. She had lived in this building for 40 years, ever since she married her husband, who had died 3 winters ago. Bong soon heard the screaming from the streets below. She walked to the edge of her rooftop garden and looked down. She saw the alien soldiers marching up the main road. She saw them pointing weapons at her neighbors. She saw old Mr. Kim being shoved to the ground by an armored creature twice his size. Bong soon did not panic. She did not run. She went inside her small apartment, walked to the bedroom closet, and pushed aside her winter coats. Behind them was a rifle case, her husband's hunting rifle. He had taught her to shoot it 40 years ago, on their first trip to the mountains together. She had not fired it in 3 years, but she cleaned it every month. It was the last thing she had of him. She loaded the rifle with steady hands. Her breathing was calm. She walked back to the rooftop, lay down behind a row of clay pots, and looked through the scope. The lead Vrel soldier was 400 meters away. He was shouting orders at the humans, gesturing with his weapon. His helmet had a clear visor so he could see better. Bong soon aimed at that visor. She remembered her husband's voice. "Breathe in. Breathe out. Squeeze. Don't pull. Let the shot surprise you." She squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The bullet flew true. The Vrel soldier's head snapped back and he fell. Dead before he hit the ground. For a moment, nothing happened. The other Vrel soldiers looked at their fallen leader. They looked at each other. They did not understand. Where had the shot come from? There was no military presence here. Their scans had confirmed it. Then another shot rang out. Another soldier fell. This shot came from a different direction. It came from a window on the 3rd floor of an apartment building to the east. The shooter was a young man named Tae-young. He was 23 years old. He worked at a convenience store. He had never served in the military because he had a medical condition that disqualified him. But he had been shooting since he was 12, every weekend with his uncle in the mountains. He had killed his first boar at 14. Taeyong fired again. Another hit. He grabbed his rifle and moved to a different window. His uncle had taught him that too. Never shoot twice from the same position. On the warship, Myra stared at her screens with growing confusion. "Commander, we have lost 3 soldiers. The shots are coming from civilian structures. Send their positions to the troops," Tova ordered. "Eliminate the shooters." "Sir, I cannot identify the shooters. They are moving, and the shots are coming from multiple locations now." Tova leaned forward. On his screens, he could see more of his soldiers falling, each one killed by a single precise shot. The humans were not using military weapons. The energy signatures were primitive. Chemical propellant, metal projectiles, ancient technology, but impossibly accurate. In the streets below, the Vrel soldiers were in chaos. They fired at buildings, at windows, at shadows. They hit nothing, but the human bullets kept coming. From rooftops, from balconies, from cars and doorways and places they could not see. A fisherman named Dong Wook fired from behind his boat, which sat on a trailer in his driveway. He had not touched a rifle in 6 years, but his hands remembered. 1 shot, 1 kill. He moved to his neighbor's yard and fired again. A high school student named J1 fired from his bedroom window. His father's hunting rifle was too big for him, but his aim was perfect. He had been hunting with his father since he could walk. A retired police officer named Kyung-hus fired from her kitchen window. She was 64 years old. She had been a marksmanship instructor for 15 years before her retirement. She could hit a target at 500 meters with iron sights. By the end of the first hour, the Vrel had lost 17 soldiers, 17 elite warriors, killed by grandmothers and students and fishermen and shopkeepers, killed by people who had never worn a uniform, killed by civilians. On his bridge, Commander Tova watched the casualty reports climb. His scales had changed color, shifting from confident green to worried gray. This was not how it was supposed to happen. This was not how it had ever happened. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Tova felt something unfamiliar. He felt uncertain. And in the streets of Pohang, Bong soon reloaded her rifle and waited for another target. Her peppers still needed watering, but that could wait. She had work to do. The meeting was held in an empty soccer stadium on the edge of the city. Tova chose the location himself. Open ground, clear sightlines, no buildings for human snipers to hide in. He was learning. He brought 50 soldiers with him, his best. They formed a circle around him, weapons ready, eyes scanning every direction. Tova stood in the center of the field and waited. The humans arrived in 3 vehicles. Simple ground transports. No weapons visible. No armor. Just 2 cars and a van. They stopped at the far end of the field, and a small group got out. Tova counted 6 humans. 4 wore military uniforms. 2 did not. They walked across the grass toward him without fear, without hesitation, as if they were walking to a business meeting and not a negotiation with alien invaders. The leader of the human group was a man in his 50s. He had gray hair cut short and a face that showed no emotion. He wore a uniform with symbols that Tova's translator identified as belonging to someone called a colonel. His name tag said Park Seung-ho. Beside him walked a younger woman. She was perhaps 30 years old, with black hair tied back in a tight knot. Her name tag said Lieutenant Yuna. She carried a tablet computer and nothing else. But Tova noticed something. She moved like a hunter, balanced, aware, ready. The other 4 humans spread out behind them. 2 soldiers with rifles. 2 people in civilian clothes. One was an old man with white hair. The other was a young woman who looked barely old enough to be an adult. Colonel Park stopped 10 meters from Tova. He bowed his head slightly. A gesture of respect, not submission. "Commander Tova," he said. His voice was calm. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Tova did not bow. "I did not come here for pleasantries, human. I came to discuss terms." "Of course. What would you like to discuss?" "Your snipers." Park raised an eyebrow. "My snipers? Do not play games with me." Tova's voice grew sharp. "Your precision shooters. The ones who have killed my soldiers. They are exceptional. Among the best I have ever seen. I acknowledge this. They have earned my respect." He paused. "I wish to negotiate their surrender separately. Warriors of such skill deserve recognition. They will be treated with honor." Park was quiet for a moment. He looked at Lieutenant Yuna. She looked back at him. Something passed between them. Something Tova could not read. "Commander," Park said slowly, "which snipers are you referring to? Your elite, your special forces, the ones hiding in the city?" Park shook his head. "I think there has been a misunderstanding. We have not deployed any special forces. We have not deployed any snipers." "Lies." Tova stepped forward. His soldiers raised their weapons. "I have lost over 100 soldiers to precision fire. Someone is shooting them." "Yes," Park agreed. "Someone is. Many someones. But they are not military." "Explain." Park nodded to Lieutenant Yuna. She stepped forward with her tablet and began reading. "The shot that killed your first soldier was fired by a woman named Bong Soon. She is 67 years old. She is retired. She worked as a seamstress for 35 years. She won a regional shooting competition in 1987. Yuna scrolled down. "The soldier killed near the elementary school was shot by a student named J1. He is 16 years old. He hunts wild boar with his father on weekends. He has never received any military training." She scrolled again. "The soldiers killed near the harbor were shot by a fisherman named Dongwook. He's 42 years old. He has not fired a rifle in 6 years. But he still remembered how." Tova listened. His scales slowly shifted color as she continued. "The sniper team you lost on the hospital roof was killed by a delivery driver named Ho Jin. The soldiers in the market district were killed by a retired police officer named Kyung Jia and 3 of her friends. They are all in their 60s. They meet every week to discuss books." Yuna lowered her tablet. "I could continue. We have identified most of the shooters. They are not soldiers, Commander. They are ordinary people, grandmothers, students, workers, fishermen, people who learned to shoot as children and never forgot." Tova stared at her. His 4 hands opened and closed. "This cannot be true. Civilians do not fight like this. Civilians do not shoot like this. Human civilians do." "How? How is this possible?" Colonel Park stepped forward again. His voice was patient, like a teacher explaining something to a confused student. "Commander, let me ask you a question. On your world, who's allowed to own weapons?" "Warriors, soldiers, those who serve the Dominion. And everyone else?" "Civilians do not need weapons. The warriors protect them." Park nodded slowly. "On Earth, things are different. On this peninsula, many families own rifles. For hunting, for sport, for tradition. Children learn to shoot before they learn to drive. Grandparents teach grandchildren. Fathers teach daughters. Mothers teach sons." He gestured to the old man behind him. "This is Chao Su. He's 74 years old. He fought in a war 50 years ago. He has practiced shooting every week since then. He can hit a target at 800 meters." He gestured to the young woman. "This is Mi Young. She is his granddaughter. She is 21 years old. She has never been in combat, but she has been shooting since she was 8. She is better than most of our soldiers." Tova looked at the old man and the young woman. They did not look like warriors. They looked ordinary, soft, harmless. But he had learned not to trust appearances. "You are telling me," Tova said slowly, That any human can be a sniper? Not any human, Park replied, but many. More than you might think. More than you can count. He paused. You asked which human is our sniper. The answer is complicated, because we do not have snipers in the way you understand it. We have a population that knows how to shoot. Then where are your military snipers? Your actual trained soldiers? Park smiled. It was a small smile, calm, confident. We have not deployed them yet. We have not needed to. What you have faced so far is just ordinary people, protecting their homes, their families, their neighbors. He let that sink in. Our actual military snipers are for when we get serious. Tova felt something cold in his chest. Fear. He was feeling fear. How many? He asked. How many of your people can shoot like this? Park looked at Lieutenant Yuna. She checked her tablet. On this peninsula alone? Approximately 4 million own firearms. Perhaps half have trained regularly? She looked up. So, around 2 million people who can hit a target at 300 meters or more. 2 million. Tova had brought 10,000 soldiers. He looked at the colonel. He looked at the old man and the young woman. He looked at Lieutenant Yuna, who he now noticed had a rifle slung across her back. She carried it like it was part of her body, like she had carried it her entire life. I need to think, Tova said. Take your time, Park replied. We are not going anywhere. Tova turned and walked back toward his soldiers. His mind was spinning. His plans were crumbling. Everything he knew about conquest, about war, about civilians and warriors, it was all wrong here. All useless. Humans were not like other species. Humans were something new, something dangerous, and Tova was beginning to realize that he had made a terrible mistake coming to this world.